Hello Steelers, and welcome to this review of the new O Group supplement, the 1941 to 43 Barbarossa to Citadel Eastern Front supplement. This is written by Dave Brown, the writer of O Group rules himself, and produced by Vicebriz Press, but you can get it over on the Two Fat Lardies website. It costs £9, it's a PDF, and was released just before Christmas, and literally about 2 days before, I think. Now, I've been been looking forward to this in particular because I'm a particular interest in the Eastern Front. It's probably my favourite theatre of the Second World War, and I knew it had been announced a while back, and probably back in November I think they were announcing it, and as I say, it was just released just before Christmas. Now, I've been waiting. I got it in PDF as soon as it came out, but I also sent it out to Docs Direct to get printed, and that's why I've kind of waited for this review, because it's a bit easier to do it via a printed version. It's currently retailing for £9 on the Two Fat Lardies website. I'll put a link obviously in the description of the video down below. And then I paid about another £10–11 I think for a printed version through Docs Direct. There are other printers out there, but the one I use generally is Docs Direct, and again I'll put their links in the description of the video down below if you want to get a copy that isn't PDF'd. So I'd had a look through it as a PDF, but then also I've had a better look through it as well as a hard copy, because I take things in a bit better when it's a hard copy. And this is an excellent addition to the growing supplements from O Group. You'll know they've already done the Fall of France 1940, they've done the 1944 Normandy supplements. The Normandy one I've already looked at and played a couple of scenarios of, and then now this is the latest one, 41 to 43, so it's early war Eastern Front, so from the Operation Barbarossa all the way through to Citadel, which was the attack at Kursk in 43, June and July of 43. So this is something I've been looking forward to in particular, and I'm very glad to have it in my hands. First of all, let's just go through it. We've got 61 pages, and I've done this in full colour. You could probably get this cheaper if you wanted to do it in black and white, or smaller in A5 rather than A4, but it's 61 pages in total. And just to give you a quick overview of the contents, we've got an introduction, a bit of history about the Eastern Front, then some additional rules for O Group itself to be added into games already. Then we have battalion organisations. Now this is interesting, we've got 6 battalion organisations here, so these are generic ones that you can use yourself with your own forces, and we've got the Russians, the Germans, Hungarians, Romanians, the Italians and the Finnish as well, so you can mix it up, everything there from the Winter War through to, as I say, Operation Barbarossa, and the German allies in the Hungarians, the Romanians and the Italians. Then we also have 8 scenarios. Now you'll remember in the previous 2 PDFs, or the previous 2 supplements, there were 6 scenarios in each of those, in the 1940 and 1944 one, so it's quite nice that there's 8 scenarios in this one, so it's taking it up a notch. And these are, we've got some campaign rules, then we have the advance to Smolensk, the roads to Moscow, the counterattack at Kharkov, Operation Blau, Pavlov's house in Stalingrad, then a 3-part Kursk game as well, 3 scenario Kursk. So we've got the assault on Ponry, Hill 254, and also Povgorovka, the tank battalion game as well, which I know quite a few people are probably quite excited about, as I was. And then also finally in here we have just a briefing and a frequently asked questions section as well, which covers some of the stuff that a lot of people come up with when playing O Group, that some of the concepts that might not have been covered so well in the original rules, they might be quite obvious when you're writing their rules, but to explain them is a different matter. So quite a lot packed in here, as I say, 60 pages, 61 pages. What I'll do is I'll change the camera, I'll get in a close-up on this, and we'll go through this page by page, and you can see exactly what is actually in the book itself, and hopefully it might be of interest for you. Okay, so here we have the cover, obviously. This is how it looks, very nice, very nicely presented, of course. And then, as I say, I got this printed Docs Direct. I got a plastic cover for it just for protection while it's being on my shelves. And straight in as well, you can see there's some fantastic photographs throughout this, which I'll show you later on, but this is from the Pavlov's house scenario that they did at Salute. Brilliant, brilliant looking model, really, really nice table, loads of details and fantastic. And contents, of course. So we have a bit of an introduction, then we've got the additional rules for the Eastern Front. We'll look at these a bit more in detail in a second. Then, as I say, we've got the battalion organisations. So here we have 6 of them. The Russians, the Germans, the Hungarians, the Romanians, Italians and Finnish. So a good mix of Eastern specific battalions that you can now throw into O Group and just make a bit more of a mix and have a play around with. And then we've got the Eastern Front scenarios as well. So we've actually got the campaign rules, similar to the Normandy campaign book. It's a bit of a, I suppose, just some scenarios that are kind of connected rather than any particular campaign. You're just basically adding up points and seeing who gets the most points. But we'll talk about that when we get to it. But you have got now, instead of 6 scenarios that you had in the Normandy book, you now got 8. So we've got the advance to Smolensk, the roads to Moscow, the counter-attack at Kharkov, Operation Blau, Pavlov's house, Kursk 43, which is actually broken into 3 parts of a campaign. So you've got Kursk 1, 2 and 3. Interestingly, you'll see as well here, we've got Povgorovka, which is the tank battalion game. So this is something that lots of people have asked about doing tank battalions, and this is where it's going to come to the forefront, because obviously Povgorovka is the supposedly the largest tank battle of all time. We'll get onto that as we have a look at it, and I'll show you some of the forces and things. Then we also have the briefing and frequently asked questions as well, which have come up through various people playing O Group over the last few years, which is really nice to see. It's good to have him. So, introduction. Quite a bit of history here. We've got 1, 2, 3 pages of history just to give you an idea of the overall setting of the Eastern Front campaign by the German army in 41 through to 45. Well, in this case up to 43 really, because we're obviously going up to Kharkov and also up to Kursk itself as well. So, you know, you can't really fit a vast amount of history into 3 pages, but it's nice at least to have an introduction and just a bit of a setting for people. Then we have some additional rules as well, specifically for Eastern Front. So here we mentioned them already. The tank commanders for tank battalions, they have a few extra rules here instead. So they can fire if close assaulted, but they also have a command radius up to 24 inches instead of, I think it's 18 for infantry. Couple other bits and pieces, rules changes here. Suppressed and killed KIA company commanders don't have to, the troops under their command don't have to roll to pass a morale test before they assault, so that's been taken out. And then we've got the German 120mm mortars, because they were using those more than artillery at regimental level, and it just makes it a bit easier for them to get them, but they are not as powerful as most regimental guns. So again, a nice little change there. Goliath demolition vehicles, whole load of new rules for those. Soviet commissars, there is a take cover rule in the original group, which is one of the additional rules, and the Soviet commissars can use this twice instead of just once, so it's quite a nice little addition just to make the Soviets slightly different. A couple of the bits and pieces here, so limited artillery as well, and this makes it a bit harder for them to actually have a zeroed in result than it would normally. They're more likely to be harassing rather than zeroed in. We also have shifting a company boundary. Now this is something that I think a lot of people were probably probably couldn't follow it so well. When you set out your company boundaries at the start of the game, it didn't really seem to mean much, because you could change them anyway during the game. I've done a video about company boundaries and things as well. However, now there's a change. If you want to change your company boundary during the course of a game, it actually costs you. So it costs a first-rate battalion a HQ order, or a second-rate battalion 2 HQ orders. So this is very specific that it's a HQ order, not a company order, and it has to be, so it's basically the higher level that's deciding it. So you have, if you want to shift emphasis on the battlefield, you're going to have to sacrifice some of those HQ orders. So that's quite nice that is clarified. I mean, that would work pretty well obviously in the Western Front or wherever else you play an O group as well, so it works on that. Then we also have a little bit more field defences. These are a little bit more in depth than they have been in O group itself, so there's quite a little bit more of a breakup here of like dugouts and gun pits and trenches and things, because obviously these were used a lot more on the Eastern Front than they would have been on the Western Front. But it still works. It's just a nice addition, just to make it slightly different from a theatre point of view. And then we go on to the Eastern Battalion organisations. A lot of this is stuff that is covered in the basic rules anyway, but it's obviously here just to remind you, so when you're using the points and things, so you don't have to look through the book, you can just get it straight from here. How many points each game will be if you're attacker defender, and I checked this. This is the same as in the core rules basically, but it's just here, as I say, as a reminder pretty much. And a few extra rules, so nothing has changed here pretty much here. However, there is a little thing just down here just to mention, is we've got the full support list for AFVs and guns, which are available at the following address, which is generaldebrigade.blogspot.com. So you'll be able to download those and get full lists of all the guns and vehicles used in O group. And I think those are slightly updated every so often. I think they brought out new ones recently. And then we get into the meat and potato, and we have here the Russian battalion. This is a 41 to 42, so this is obviously the older version of this, and this is before they start to change in 43 and develop. As it says here, from 41 to 42, Russian platoons were square, so they have 4 sections in each company, or at least in each platoon. So these are going to be quite big actually, and they are second rate with rigid reserves as well. So they're pretty big lumps of men basically running about. And then of course, as before with all the other O group stuff, we've got all the support elements, and then we have the training characteristics. So for these, they've got poor training. They've also got Russian tanks, which are designated as poor, and they're without radios from 39 to 42. They also have strength in numbers. So they can replace units. This is similar again to their basic one in the O group rules itself, where they can replace a destroyed platoon with a green platoon instead at the start of the game. And also the Russian opening bombardment adds an extra turn of interdiction to the defender's interdiction turn, so that's pretty good really. Using the mother of the battlefield, so the gods of the battlefield, should I say, the artillery. And then this one again is back in the original O group rules, the relieved of command. You can use 2 HQ orders to get rid of a company commander if they become hesitant. So basically they've been taken behind the chemical sheds and shot, and you basically re-roll your O group dice, ignoring the previous scores and ignoring that hesitant company results as well, which is quite nice touch. On top of that, we also have this big list here of Soviet vehicles, and this would work pretty much all the way through. This goes up, I'm just looking here, 41, 42. These go up to 43, so the Churchills and things, this is the year they're introduced. So this is early war stuff really for the Russians. So again, I mentioned it before, there's probably going to be an additional later supplement for the later war in the Eastern Front, and I guess that will then just add on to the Russian vehicle list that there are. German battalions, 41 to 42, so the early war in the East again, and these says here, so they have 3 infantry companies. Infantry companies consists of 1 infantry company commander and 3 infantry platoons. So, and again in 41 they were square, so you get the 4 sections. Then from 42 they had 3 sections, so ever so slightly different depending if you're doing it in 41 or 42. Pretty typical. Again, once again, just to say that you've got the typical German supports here, and then on the back of here we have the German training characteristics. I'm not going to go through every single one of these because I don't want to give everything away. You're going to have to buy some of this yourself, I think. But divisional supports, again, a real good mix of German stuff here. Goes up to 42, 43. these vehicles, just to show you when they're introduced. So once again, I'm fairly sure there will be an additional amount of these. Now this is the stuff that isn't in the original book, so we've got the Hungarians as well. These are slightly smaller, so these are 3 infantry rifle platoons, each with each platoon consists of 3 rifle sections, so these are quite small. The Hungarian ones here, you could pretty much use these throughout the entire war by the looks of things, but you have the option to increase your size of your companies to 4 platoons if you wanted to. You've also got the full Hungarian series of guns and vehicles, and you'll notice here these ones are starting in 44, so slightly later, 44. So these could be used quite easily for the for the second half of the Eastern Front. So it's worthwhile getting, if you're looking at doing some Hungarian stuff, it's worthwhile just to get this as well, really, to add on. Then one of my favourites, the Romanians. These are also, this is another 3 infantry rifle platoons and 4 rifle sections, so again large numbers. I've already got some Romanians in my O group forces, and I do want to add more, so this is nice that I can now work towards, you know, these lists and things, instead of just making them up based off the Soviet ones that I had done previously. Then we've got the Italians. Obviously, because they were fighting on the Eastern Front as well. You could, again, quite easily just use these, some of these on the Western Front if you wanted to, fighting against the French in 1940 down in the south, and even a bit later if you wanted to. Just messing about with some of these would work really well for the Italian campaigns, and North Africa even. Now, I mean, you know, I'm fairly sure that they're going to be doing, I think David already said they're going to do a North African supplement for O Group, so, you know, you might not want to jump the gun, or you might want to wait for that, but you've got a lot of Italian stuff here as well. And then finally the Finnish, so this is really for, obviously, for the winter war against the Soviets, but again, we have another good list of vehicles and weapons that the Finnish are using. So we've got the Winter War and then the Continuation War as well. So you can mess about with the Finnish as well. You don't just have to do it as Winter War. Right, that's the basic generic lists. But then we actually come on to the campaign itself, and as I say, we've got a campaign rule where you basically record points, and you get points for however many fubars you inflict on the enemy, or if you get a victory point if you win the battle but didn't defeat the enemy purely on fubars. So if you get whatever the scenario objective is, you get an extra point for it. And then you just basically add them up, and whoever gets the most, you have a victory points tier. So if the Germans win by 4 or more, it's a triumph in the east, a German victory, and then drops all the way down to if the Germans lose, the Germans are no longer capable for offensive actions on the Eastern Front. So it's just a way of playing through 8 games and just seeing who wins. As I say, you know, it doesn't seem to continue on from one to the next. They are pretty separate scenarios, so you could play them quite easily just as separate scenarios, but it's nice just to be able to keep a running tally as what is happening to either side as well. So first one, the advance to Smolensk, 1941. We have a Russian order of battle, so these ones are more specific for the scenarios, so you could just pick these up without having to to create your own force lists. And all of these are laid out pretty much the same. Introduction to the fighting, the mission for both sides, your deployments, any special rules that you have, your 2 forces, and then terrain. These are the rules for terrain, and then also these fantastic maps by Joe Bilton, Joe the Wargamer, over on Twitter. Well worth looking at. One half of Heroic Maps. In fact, they do a lot of D&D and role-playing maps, and they've also produced the maps for these last couple of supplements, and it really shows. They're lovely. Then we have the Road to Moscow. This is, you may recognise this one. This was one that Dave and his son Chris were both playing on the introduction games that they played for the Two Fat Lardies YouTube channel. And you might be able to recognise the table here from it, with the little gully that came down the bottom here, and Voyne and the other places as well. I've also played this scenario as well because this was produced in the Two Fat Lardies. I think it was last year's magazine, special magazine, their Lardy special. So this has already been out there, but again, this has just been tidied up and nice new bits and pieces added to it. Then we've got the counter-attack at Kharkov, 42. So this is a Soviet counter-attack against the Germans this time. So it's not always the Germans pushing forward, but you know, we've got a Soviet counter-attack this time, so that's quite nice to see. And same again, always, you know, special rules and the terrain and everything. Scenarios 4 is Operation Blau. This is, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, against the oil fields of the Caucasus down the south. And this is either Germans or Hungarians, so it depends on who you have. If you've only got Germans, just stick the Germans in. If you've got Hungarians, or you want to create a Hungarian battalion, there you go. You've got a Hungarian battalion ready for the table right there. And again, obviously up against the Russians and the Russian defences. So we move on to Pavlov's house, and I mentioned this one previously. This one was played out at not only at Salute but also at Lard Workshop in Nottingham as well. They brought this along, the two guys, a small cut down version of it, and I played this as well with the chaps at my club, and we quite enjoyed it. But it was a learning game for them. I probably should have really run something else because this was probably a little bit too much for them in the first one, but never mind that. But very interesting, very different. Obviously urban terrain, so we have a lot of buildings, a lot of open area here as well for the Germans to get in. It's quite a difficult one for them to get over these open areas here, but once again, it's just a way of showing how to play O Group differently to what you would expect over in Normandy, at least. You know, these quite open areas, urban areas as well, quite a lot of heavily defender built up areas. And then the final three scenarios are 7, 8, 6, 7 and 8, and this is Kursk 43, so these ones are far more connected. Again, we've got a bit of introduction to the campaign itself, and a very famous campaign itself is Kursk, and the first one is Ponry, the Northern Battle. Now this is interesting because this Ponry was an old rapid fire scenario for their Eastern Front supplement as well. So it's quite interesting to see it have been resurrected as an O Group game, because I always thought it would work really well as an O Group game, and it certainly, you know, it certainly can do. I don't know how much Dave was influenced by the Eastern Front supplement of Rapid Fire, but I'd be surprised if he hadn't at least read it or got a copy of it, especially for Ponry itself. This is the one where the Germans are using their, now let me guess it right, it's the Ferdinands, not the Elephants, it's the Ferdinands. They had a couple of those. It's the first time they were introduced as assault guns, the big 88mm assault guns that they were using at Ponry. And there we go, there's our nice little Ponry table. And once again, look at how open that terrain is, so that would be a very difficult one, especially with tank fire going. Then we have Part 2, sorry, this is Hill 254, the Southern Battle. Another largish battle, again, lovely photos, as I said, throughout. I don't know whose photos these are or where these have come from. This one might be from the Stalingrad game, but I'm not entirely sure. But another interesting relatively open steppe-like battlefield, you know, with very little areas, few areas for obvious ambush and things. But yeah, overall, quite a difficult one to fight through if you're fighting through the Germans. And then finally, the one that you've all been waiting for, I'm fairly sure, Scenario 8, Pokrovka, the tank battle itself. Let's have a bit more of a closer look at this. So this is the Soviets' order of battle. They have, you can see here straight away, we've got tank company commander, and then we also have our third company, which is an infantry one. We also have a heavy tank platoon and various other bits and pieces, anti-tank guns, and then we have a fourth tank company as well, mostly made up, you can see T-34s, T-34s and T-70s, and then a smattering of infantry just to add on as well. Obviously tanks don't just operate on their own. We also have for the Germans as well, this is the 2nd SS, and these have their Panzer 3s, Panzer 4s, Panzer 3s and Panzer 4s as well, long and short barrels of those. And again, 2 companies of those, again with a 3rd company made up of infantry and a couple of anti-tank platoons as well, and assault guns, so Stugs as well. Then we have the special rules for this. So we've got the tank commanders, for example, and combat patrols, and tank battalions don't use combat patrols. Only the infantry companies will be using those. So that makes things slightly different, because obviously tanks don't deploy onto combat patrols anyway. And then some more information here about the tank company boundaries and the allocation of tanks as well. So they just work in the same way as infantry company boundaries do. But the tank platoons directly are under, moreover, tank platoons directly under the command of tank commanders at the start of the game, such as the Russian T-34s, cannot be reallocated or redeployed to other companies. So they're quite, they've got a bit of a what's the word, an embuggeration, I guess. They can't be moved about too much. And then there's our final Pokrovka map, which again is another big open space. Interesting tank ditch at the back here, the German defence line, and not a great deal of places to set up many ambushes there. But anyway, that will be played out on the battlefield, I'm fairly sure. And then finally, page 61. Is section 5, O Group's G2 briefing and frequently asked questions. So there's a couple of bits and pieces here. This is just stuff that has come up over the last few years of questions that people have asked, and I know quite a number of us have asked this. We had a long discussion a while back during the game about what happens to heavy weapons if the infantry platoon is entirely killed in action. I always just took it off with the infantry platoon, but it actually stays on if it survives as a single section and continues to operate. So that's a slight difference to what I've normally done, but then it's good to get that in writing. And also the artillery attack, it's mentioned, this is something a lot of people miss, and it's only just mentioned in the artillery table itself, but is if you either if you're under fire from artillery, and this actually clarifies it, I'll tell you why in a second. If you're in light cover or in the open, you either retreat or you take an additional shock if you've been hit by artillery. However, you can ignore it if you're in a trench or a built-up area or a bunker. However, if they're in the open, they've definitely got to retreat or take that shock. So it makes artillery just that slightly bit harder against the defender if you get caught in the open with it. And again, it's good to have it actually clarified, because I spoke to Chris about this of CrackCon 2, and I think he'd hinted at least that it was basically a last-minute addition, so they were only able to slip it into the bottom of a table rather than make it a separate rule itself, which is why a lot of people miss it. And I know I did for a long time. So really, again, I'm not going to go through every single one of these. It's just interesting to see that we have, the facts for most stuff that has come up, and it's stuff that I know has come up as well when I've thought about it in various rules and things. So it's good to have that stuff in writing. All right, that's it. No more on there. That's the last page. So that is your 1941 to 43 Barbarossa Citadel Eastern Front O Group supplement from beginning to end. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, let me know in the comments below. Let me know if you bought it, what you think of it yourself. I think it's a great piece of work for £9. A lot of work has gone into this, and I'm looking very much forward to the next O Group supplements, which I'm hoping is going to be at least a follow-on to this 43 to 45 with the bigger tanks and things that everybody likes a bit of Panzerporn. I love the early stuff as well. So this is my preferred theatre for the Second World War, so I'm very glad to see it. So if you've enjoyed this video, please do drop me a like down below, share it somewhere if you want to, please do. If you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe as well, it all helps the channel out. If you want to check out my Patreon and also channel memberships, you will get videos early, and there's quite a few coming up for January, so keep a lookout for the schedule for January, which will be released on the January the 1st, and you'll get free advert free and early access to those videos on the schedule. And all it remains for me to say is once again, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next Storm of Steel video.